Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the course of communication skills. Today it is the 14th lecture of communication skills, and in this lecture we are going to discuss active listening. So the title of this lesson is What is Active Listening? I am Muhammad Asif Khan, lecturer, Department of English, Ohio University of Science and Technology. Dear students, agenda for today's discussion is that first of all we will revise some of the important points of the last lecture, and I will give you the introduction of language skills. Then we will see different stages of listening process, and after that I will give you a brief recap of types of listening. And then we will come to the main discussion of this lesson, that is, what is active listening. After discussing active listening, I will give you 8 steps to become an active listener. That is the whole discussion for today's lecture. Let's move towards the 4 skills of language learning. As I told you in the last lecture, listening, speaking, reading and writing are the 4 skills of language learning. So dear students, the first skill which a learner learns when he is acquiring some language, that is listening skill. Then comes the number of speaking, that is followed by reading, and in the end the most important skill of any language, that is writing skill. Most of the time we see that the person who is learning any language, he learns this skill in the very end. So the order of acquiring or attaining or learning any language is listening, speaking, reading and writing. So let's move toward receptive skills. Listening and reading are called receptive skills because in these skills the person or individual is listening or receiving the information. Then comes the productive skills. Speaking and writing are productive skills, and in these 2 skills the person who is using the productive skills is actually producing something. So therefore these 2 skills are called productive skills because the person is producing something. So what is listening? The question we already discussed in the last class. Listening includes recognizing or classifying different sounds of speech and then processing them into words and sentences. Listening is basically an active process by which a person who is listening, he makes sense of, he recognizes different sounds and then evaluate them, and in the end we see that he reacts to those very sounds. So listening is that process in which the person he first of all comprehends something, then he judges the value of those very sounds, and in the end we see he replies to that very communication. So now let's move towards the stages of listening process. As I have already explained to you that listening process comprises of 5 stages. The first one is receiving. The person is getting information. The second is understanding. The listener is comprehending the information which is coming to him. Then comes the number of evaluating. Listener judge and assess the information that is coming to him. And the fourth stage is remembering that very thing. The listener actually he recollects or memorize all those very things which are coming to him. And the last stage is when he receives something, understand that very message and evaluate and remember the important points of that message. In the end, we see that he responds to that message, and in this way the process of communication completes. Now let's move towards the types of listening. These are the basic types of listening. We can also categorize listening into a number of other types, but those very types are on some other basis. Here we are looking at the simple types of listening. The first one is positive listening. That is basically a constructive listening. It has two types, the active and polite listening. In active listening, we see that listener is very dynamically looking at the things. The second type of positive listening is polite listening. In this very listening, the listener is very much courteous to the speaker. The second type is neutral listening, which has the qualities of unbiasedness or impartiality, and it has two types, passive listening and selective listening. The last one is negative listening, which is unconstructive type of listening, and it has two further divisions. Those are defensive and aggressive listening. In defensive listening, we come across such type of listener which are having distrust or who is disbelieving the speaker, and the aggressive listener is that listener he is violently or forcefully reacting to the communication of the speaker. So these are some of the types of listening. Now let's move towards the actual discussion of today's lecture, that is active listening. The definition of active listening is that active listening is a specific communication method that requires that the listener provide response and he provide or give us the opinion and views about the communication which he is hearing and what the speaker is talking about. So this active listening is done by the method of repeating or saying again the information, or summarizing or rephrasing what they have heard in their own words. So it has some techniques by which we can do active listening. The first one is that we provide feedback, and the second is that we restate or we repeat those very things, or we summarize or sum up the things which the speaker is discussing, on which the speaker is speaking. So the goal of this repetition, the aim and objective of this repetition is to confirm, to verify what the listener has heard, and basically it is authenticating that what the speaker is speaking, basically listener is understanding and comprehending that very thing. So it is basically a validation or the understanding that that the both parties are on the same page, and what the speaker is talking about, the listener is hearing the same thing. This very capability of active listening, or this very aptitude, it shows that sincerity and seriousness that nothing is being taken as granted. The listener is not just assuming things, and he is not taking things for granted. He is not supposing things, or he is not living in imaginations. He is actively or very honestly listening the things what the speaker is providing to him. Active listening is most often used to develop or get better the personal relations, and it has another significance that it minimizes and it reduces or decreases those confusions and misinterpretations and disagreements between the listener and speaker. So when the listener is actively listening, it reinforces or build up the cooperation between the both parties, and it also encourages and advances the understanding between listener and speaker. So now let's move toward another slide, and in this slide I will describe to you that when you are engaging with or when you are dealing with some specific speaker, listener can employ and make use of different levels of active listening, and each of these very methods that will result in different quality of communication with speakers. So this active listening basically has three main degrees of listening. The first one is repeating or restating or saying again the words which the speaker is saying. The second degree of active listening is paraphrasing. In this the listener summarizes or rephrases the words of the speaker. And the last one is reflecting. It means that the listener gives his own opinion about the speaker's communication. Active listening can also incorporate putting attention to the speaker's behavior, manner, conduct, and the body language, which type of non-verbal communication he's doing. So active listening also pays attention to the non-verbal communication of the speaker. So if he is having the ability to interpret and read the speaker's body language, it allows the listener to develop more exact and perfect understanding of the speaker's message. Now let's move towards the last part of today's lecture, and that is that we will discuss the 8 steps to become an active listener. The first step to become an active listener, or to develop that capability or skill to become an active listener, is that we should deal each and every conversation or dialogue with that objective in our mind, keeping that very thing in our mind, that we are learning something. You just think of that person as someone who can teach you. The speaker is the person as if he is teaching something you, and he has that ability to teach you something. The second step is that stop talking and just pay attention, close attention, focus closely on the speaker. So that is the second step, that if the person who is listening, he pay attention directly to the conversation of the speaker, and he represses that wish to think about what the speaker is going to say subsequently, or to different multitasks. If we stop thinking about those very things, that is the second step. Then we move toward the third step, and that is that listener opens and directs the conversation. How he can do that very thing, that he open and guide the conversation, that is with broad open-ended questions, like we see that what other strategic alternatives did you consider? If you will ask such type of open-ended questions, that will have a positive impact on the whole conversation, on the whole discussion. Or you can ask, how do you visualize these very things? And if the listener he keep away from close-ended questions which can be answered with just yes or no. If listener has this ability that he just ask and put forward such type of questions which are open-ended and that broadens the discussion, that will be the third step to become an active listener. The fourth step is that drill out or find out the details of that very subject. If the listener has the ability to ask the details by asking directives or specific questions that focus the conversation, that focuses the conversation, such as tell me more about this very thing, or how did you come to this conclusion, or how would this work? Such type of questions will make you an active listener. Now let's move toward the fifth step to become an active listener. The fifth step is that listener should summarize what he hears and ask questions to examine this very thing, that what is his understanding about the topic. So questions such as, if I am understanding you, and then he just rephrase the words of the speaker, or tell me if this is what you are saying, and then he repeat those very ideas, that will make him an active listener, and he will grasp more and more information from the speaker. The sixth step is that he should encourage and he should give confidence with positive feedback. If he is responding the speaker with a smile or a note or a positive questions, it shows the interest of the listener. If the listener see that the speaker is in some trouble and he is very difficultly expressing his point of view, he should encourage him. He should boost up him with a smile. So I have listed some other things to you. These are some of the things which listener can do to boost up the communication. And the seventh step to become an active listener is listen for the total meanings. If the person is not going for the complete meanings, it will not be easy for him to comprehend the actual or the true message. So the most important thing is that a listener should understand that what is actually being said, what is the real message. Maybe sometime you will see that the real message or the true message is being conveyed non-verbally or emotionally. It means that the body language or the emotions or the non-verbal communication is the actual communication, whereas what the speaker is speaking with the words, that is not the actual message. So it is very important for an active listener to check body language, because it is one of the technique to find out the true understanding of the message. The last step is to pay attention to your responses. Remember that the way you respond to a question, that is also a part of a dialogue. Keep an open mind, and you should demonstrate respect, reverence for the speaker's point of view, or any person who is there in the discussion. Even if you are having a different point of view, you are having dissimilar views, even then you should show respect to that very person. That shows that you are an active listener. So in this lecture we have discussed, first of all, I have given you the introduction of language skills, and then we revised or recap the order of learning these very skills. Then we have a very brief discussion on receptive and productive skills, and after that I have given you a small chunk of information on the types of listening. And then we came to the actual discussion, that is about the active listening, and in the end we discussed the 8 steps to become an active listener. So thank you very much for listening passionately. See you in the next lecture. Thank you very much. Bismillah.